Welcome, everyone. Before I tell you this story, I want to speak to you honestly, from the heart. This video is not about grammar tips. It's not about vocabulary lists. It's not about some magical method to speak English in 30 days. No, this video is about something much more real. It's about pain, promise, and power. Because if you're someone who's ever felt too scared to speak English, if you've ever felt small in a room full of confident people, if you've ever stayed silent, not because you had nothing to say, but because you didn't know how to say it in English, then this video is your story too. You will not just watch my journey. You will feel it. Because I was just like you. This is the story of how I went from someone who was too afraid to speak even a single sentence to someone who today speaks English confidently, not perfectly, but freely. And the best part? I didn't have a teacher. I didn't go to coaching. I didn't have friends who spoke English. But I had something else. A reason, a fire, and a promise I made to myself. In this video, I'm going to take you inside my life. I'll show you every step. The hard days, the silent nights, the embarrassment, the failures, and how all of that turned into strength, into confidence, and into real fluency. You will learn how to start your English journey alone, how I trained myself without classes, how I made English part of my life, how I kept going even when I wanted to quit, and how you can do the same, starting today. But most importantly, you'll learn that you don't need to be confident to start. You just need to start. If you stay till the end of this video, I promise, you'll never look at English the same way again. Because this story could be your story. Let's begin. Part 1. The Promise. My name is Liam. I'm 19 years old. I come from a very small town, the kind of place where people don't dream too big. My father is a mechanic. He fixes cars. My mother works as a housemaid. We don't have much money. No smartphones growing up. No internet. No English books at home. We spoke only our local language. Growing up, English felt like a rich person's language. I used to see people on TV speaking fluently and smiling, and I always thought, that will never be me. In school, I was good at reading English, but when the teacher asked me to speak, I froze. My mouth would go dry. My heart would beat fast. I remember one day in class, I was asked to say just one sentence. My name is Liam, and I want to be a teacher. That's it, but I couldn't do it. I stood there shaking. The whole class laughed. That day, something inside me broke. Not just because people laughed, but because I knew I had something to say, and I couldn't say it. That night, I walked home alone. I didn't talk to anyone. I just kept hearing the sound of people laughing in my head. I looked at my reflection in a shop window and I whispered, one day, I will speak English. I don't care how long it takes. I don't care how hard it is. I'll do it. That was the moment I made the promise. I didn't tell anyone, not my parents, not my friends. This was my war, my mountain, my secret mission. From that day on, I decided, I will train myself. No coaching, no teachers, just me and my voice. And that's how it started, with one promise. A quiet, lonely promise made by a 19-year-old boy who had no idea what he was doing, but who had one thing stronger than fear: the decision to never stay silent again. This was just the beginning. Part 2. The struggle. Begin. After I made that promise to myself, I felt strong for about one day. The next morning, I woke up early, washed my face, stood in front of the mirror, and said, today I start speaking English. but nothing came out. My mind went blank. My throat closed. Even though I was alone, I still felt watched, judged, by myself. I tried to say something simple, just one sentence. How are you? But it felt like I was pushing a heavy rock out of my mouth. I realized something painful that day. Learning English is not just about words, it's about fear, and that fear lives inside your body. My hands were sweating. I felt stupid. I thought, why is this so hard? I know these words. Why can't I say them? That day, I recorded myself speaking. I used my father's old phone. I tried to say, my name is Liam. I want to learn English. I recorded it. And then I played it back. When I heard my voice, I wanted to delete it immediately. It didn't sound like me. It sounded broken, slow, embarrassed. I had pauses in the wrong places. My pronunciation was wrong. I sounded like someone who didn't belong. And suddenly, I started crying. Not because my English was bad, but because for the first time in my life, I was hearing my fear with my own ears. That night, I couldn't sleep. My brain kept repeating that one line. You're not good enough. You'll never be fluent. The next morning, I thought about quitting. I thought maybe this was stupid. Maybe English was not for people like me. But then, I remembered the promise. That quiet promise I made while looking into a shop window, walking home in silence. And I decided to try again. This time, I changed something. I didn't try to speak perfect English. I just tried to speak one sentence with feeling. Not grammar, just feeling. I looked into the mirror and said, I want to be better. That was it. That sentence was not complex. It wasn't even about English. But I said it with emotion, with truth. And for the first time, I didn't feel weak. That one sentence became my daily habit. Every day before school, I would wake up 15 minutes early. I'd lock the bathroom door, and I'd speak to myself, out loud, even if it was just 2 or 3 lines. Sometimes it was, today is going to be a good day. I am trying my best. English is not my enemy. I can learn, even if I'm slow. At school, nothing had changed. I was still silent in class. I still avoided conversations. I still didn't raise my hand when the teacher asked a question. But something had changed inside me, even if no one else could see it. I had started my war, and every sentence I spoke alone was a tiny victory in that war. But let me be honest with you. Those early days were not beautiful. They were full of pain. People don't talk about that part enough. They don't tell you what it feels like to try your best and still be invisible, to practice speaking alone for weeks, and then fail again the moment someone actually asks you a question in real life. It happened to me 2 weeks after I started mirror practice. I was at the small grocery shop near my house. A man visiting from the city came in. He was speaking English with the shop owner's son, who had studied in a better school. I stood there, frozen, and then, for 1 second, the man looked at me and said, "Hey buddy, can you tell me where the main road is?" It was a simple question, very simple, and I had practiced answering questions like that in front of the mirror. But in real life, my mouth refused to move. I looked at him, and after 2 long silent seconds, I just shook my head and said nothing. He smiled politely and asked someone else. No one cared. But I did. I walked back home, feeling crushed. All that mirror practice, and still I failed. I wanted to throw away my notebook. I wanted to stop speaking. I thought, maybe I'm just pretending. Maybe this whole thing is a lie. That night, I didn't practice. I just sat in bed, looking at the ceiling, asking myself, am I fooling myself? What if I never get better? But the next morning, I stood in front of the mirror again, not because I felt strong, but because I had promised myself I would not stop, even if it hurt, even if no one believed in me, even if I had to fail 100 times, because deep down, I knew this was the only way. And so, I began again. This time, slower, more honest, more real. That's when I learned something important, something I want you to remember. Fluency is not about speaking fast. Fluency is about being brave every day. Even when your voice shakes, even when you fail, even when no one claps. That truth became the fuel for my next step. And what happened after that changed everything. That morning, when I looked into the mirror again, something was different. No, I didn't suddenly speak better. No, my pronunciation didn't magically improve overnight. And no, I wasn't full of confidence. But I had made a decision in my heart, something unbreakable. I told myself, from now on, I will speak English every single day. Even if it's just 5 minutes. Even if it's broken. Even if no one listens. Because I am not doing this for anyone else. I am doing this for me. That was the beginning of my English ritual. A quiet war I fought inside a small room, but one that changed my life forever. Every evening after dinner, I would go into my room. No noise, no internet, no books. Just me and a small mirror on the wall. And I would begin talking. I didn't follow any big English program. I didn't watch expensive tutorials. I just spoke. Some days I started with a simple line. Hi, Liam, how was your day? And I'd answer myself. My day was okay. I went to school. I was tired, but I'm proud because I am still trying. Every day I tried to speak for at least 10 minutes. At first it felt awkward, unnatural, slow. I had to think before every word. But I never missed a day, not even one. It became like brushing my teeth. If I didn't speak in English that day, I didn't feel clean. And something strange started to happen after 3 weeks. I noticed that my brain was slowly changing. One night, while lying in bed, I realized something shocking. I had been thinking in English without trying. I was planning what to say the next day. And my thoughts were in English. That was the moment I cried again. But this time, it wasn't out of sadness. It was because for the first time, I felt like I was winning. No one else could see it. No one else would clap for it. But inside me, there was a quiet celebration. I was no longer a boy trying to speak English. I was becoming a boy who lives in English. I built my own practice system with nothing but my voice. Since I couldn't afford classes, I had to create my own structure. So I created 3 speaking zones every day. Zone 1. Morning self-talk, 2 minutes. While brushing my teeth or washing my face, I would say things like, today is a new day. I will speak English. I'm not afraid. My name is Liam. I'm strong. I'm learning. These were not complex sentences, but they gave me power. Zone 2. Evening mirror practice, 10 to 15 minutes. This was my main training time. Each day, I picked a small topic. Nothing too hard. For example, talk about my school day, what I ate for lunch, describe my mother, my favorite memory. If I had a dream job, what would it be? I'd stand in front of the mirror and just talk, talk, talk. At first, I used broken English. Half my words were wrong, but I kept going. Because I knew. Fluent people are not perfect. They're just consistent. Zone 3. Whisper practice before sleeping, 2 to 3 minutes. Before closing my eyes, I would lie in bed and whisper 3 to 5 sentences. About anything. I remember one night, I whispered, "I love this language. I don't know why, but I feel alive when I speak it." That sentence stayed with me forever. After a few weeks of daily practice, something else happened. When I looked at objects, like a chair, a pen, a tree, my brain started saying their names in English automatically. Not because I forced it, but because repetition had planted those words deep in my brain. I was slowly building my mental English map. I no longer had to translate everything from my language into English. I started understanding ideas directly in English. This is called thinking in English. And it's not a miracle. It's a result of daily effort, emotional connection, and no skipping. One evening, something strange and powerful happened. I was sitting with my little cousin. He was playing with a toy and asked, "What is this?" I casually said, "That's a train. It goes fast. Choo-choo." And then I paused. I had just spoken 3 full English sentences. Without thinking, without fear, without shame. And that moment broke something inside me. Not my confidence, my limits. I realized, I'm not learning English anymore. I'm now becoming a person who lives in English. People think fluency means speaking fast. No, fluency means feeling free. I was still making mistakes. I still had an accent. I still didn't know many big words. But I didn't care, because English was no longer a subject. It was my language of growth, my private world, my way of changing my life, word by word, sentence by sentence. And the best part? I did all of this, alone, at home, without a teacher, without fear, without quitting, because I believed one thing deeply. If I speak every day, my brain will follow, my confidence will grow, and my future will change. And that belief was about to be tested in the most unexpected way. Part 3. The Small Wins. After weeks of speaking alone in my room, I had grown stronger, but only inside. I could now speak 10 to 15 sentences without stopping. I could describe my day, my feelings, even my dreams. I was still making mistakes, but I was no longer afraid of them. But deep down, I knew something was missing. I was still hiding. All my English was private, like a secret. It was time to face the real world. I wanted to practice with people, but I was afraid. There was a small community center 3 kilometers from my home. They had free weekend sessions for English practice. Not formal classes, just open groups where learners gathered to talk. I had heard about it many times, but I never had the courage to go. What if they laughed at me? What if I forgot all my words? What if I stood there, frozen, again? These questions haunted me. But one Sunday morning, I put on a clean shirt, combed my hair, and walked there alone. My legs felt heavy. Every step felt like I was walking into fire. But I didn't stop. I reached the room. There were about 7 to 8 people sitting in a circle. Some were reading from paper. Some were practicing greetings. One girl was nervously introducing herself. The coordinator smiled at me and said, "New face? You want to join?" I nodded. My mouth was too dry to speak. I sat quietly in the corner and listened. Everyone was nervous. Everyone was making mistakes. But no one was laughing. That gave me hope. After 20 minutes, the coordinator looked at me and said, "Would you like to introduce yourself?" That moment, it felt like the earth had stopped moving. My heart started beating fast. My throat became tight. My palms were wet. I could feel everyone's eyes on me. But I remembered my mirror. I remembered my room. I remembered the promise. So I stood up, took a slow breath, and said, "Hello, my name is Liam. I am 19 years old. I love English. I want to speak better. I am learning alone." Then silence. For 3 seconds, no one said anything. And then they clapped. They clapped. Not because it was perfect, not because it was advanced, but because it was real. That applause didn't last more than 5 seconds. But inside me, it felt like fireworks. That was my first public win. I had spoken English, in front of people, and I survived. That moment became the turning point in my confidence. It wasn't about fluency. It wasn't about grammar. It was about courage. For the next 30 minutes, I didn't speak again. I just listened. But my mind had changed forever. Now I knew. I can do this, even with fear, even with broken sentences. I can speak. I started going. Every Sunday, and every week I grew. In the beginning, I still said very little. Sometimes just 2 or 3 lines. But every week, I challenged myself to say one more sentence than last time. One week I described my favorite food. Another week, I talked about my parents. Once I shared how I was practicing alone with a mirror. And a few people smiled and said, "That's brave. I should try that too." That was the first time I felt like a helper, not just a learner. It changed my identity. One day I went to a grocery shop again. The same one where I had failed to answer a simple question months earlier. This time, I saw a foreign tourist asking for water. No one understood him. I walked up slowly and said, "You want a bottle of water?" He said, "Yes, please." "Thank you." I showed the bottle, took the money, and gave the change. He smiled and said, "Your English is good." I didn't say much, just smiled back. But inside me, I was flying. Every sentence I spoke outside my room felt like climbing a mountain. And these victories weren't loud. No one shared them online. No one recorded them. No one posted them with hashtags. But they were real. Every sentence was a step away from fear. Every word was a brick in the house I was building. The house called confidence. One night, I sat alone and wrote this in my diary. Today I spoke to a stranger. He understood me. That means I am not invisible anymore. I closed the book and cried, not from sadness, from belief. Because for the first time, I felt that maybe, just maybe, I was becoming the person I always dreamed of. And that, my friend, is the most powerful shift in language learning. It's not when you become fluent. It's when you stop being ashamed of not being fluent yet. Because the moment you stop hiding, the moment you stop apologizing, the moment you say, "Yes, I make mistakes, but I'm speaking anyway," that's the moment you start to win. That's the moment the world starts to hear you. And I was ready for more. It had been almost 3 months since I made the promise to myself. 3 months of mirror practice. 3 months of whispering words in the dark. 3 months of slow confidence, small victories, and inner change. By now, I had started to feel like I belonged. I could hold a short conversation. I was joining the Sunday group confidently. I even started helping others who were more shy than me. But then something happened that shook everything. It was a small marketing company. They were looking for students who could assist with basic research and office work. The requirement was simple: basic English communication skills. When I saw the poster, I felt excited. This was my chance. Not just to practice real English, but to work in a real office, to earn something, to show my parents that I was growing. I applied. I filled the form. I prepared my introduction. I practiced for 4 nights straight. I stood in front of the mirror and said my lines over and over again. Hello, my name is Liam. I'm passionate about learning and growing. I may not be perfect, but I believe in showing up. I even rehearsed the possible interview questions. What are your strengths? Why do you want this job? What makes you a good fit? I wrote my answers. I practiced them 20 times. I believed I was ready. I reached early. My shirt was clean. I was wearing shoes I had polished myself. My hands were shaking, but I kept whispering, "You've got this, Liam. You've worked for this. You've spoken to real people. You are ready." When my name was called, I walked in. There were 2 people, 1 man and 1 woman. They smiled, and the man said, "Hi, Liam, please sit. Let's begin. Tell us about yourself." I opened my mouth, and nothing came out. My mind went blank. Every word I had practiced disappeared. I couldn't breathe. My mouth went dry. I was suddenly the same scared boy from school again. The silence lasted only 6 seconds, but in my heart, it felt like a storm. Finally, I said, I want job because I learn. My sentence was broken. My voice was shaking. I could see the woman trying to be kind, but her eyes showed concern. The man said, "Take your time. It's okay." But I knew it wasn't okay, because this wasn't just an interview. This was my test, and I was failing. The rest of the interview was just as bad. I couldn't connect my sentences. I forgot simple words. I used wrong tenses. And worst of all, I couldn't look them in the eyes. After 15 minutes, they said, "Thank you for coming, Liam. We'll let you know." I smiled politely, walked out, and the moment I reached the gate, I broke down. I cried because I felt like all my effort was a lie. 3 months of practice, 3 months of hope, 3 months of whispering dreams into a mirror. And still, when it mattered most, I froze. I walked home with my head down. I didn't eat that night. I didn't touch my diary. I didn't go near the mirror. I felt like a fraud. I felt like someone who was pretending to learn English, but couldn't use it when it really counted. That night, I wanted to quit. I skipped my mirror practice. I didn't speak a single English word. I didn't even watch any English videos. I just lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, hearing my own inner voice say, "You're not improving. You're just wasting time. You'll never be fluent. You'll always be behind." For the first time since my journey began, I felt truly empty. But then, something small saved me. It wasn't a video. It wasn't a book. It wasn't a friend. It was a note I had written to myself on the very first day I began this journey. I had taped it on the side of my desk. I had forgotten about it. It said, "No matter how slow you go, as long as you don't stop, you're still winning." I read that line 10 times, and then something inside me whispered, "Liam, this is not the end. This is just a test." I wasn't afraid of English. I was afraid of being judged. In front of the mirror, I felt safe. With friends, I felt comfortable. But when I entered a professional room, my fear returned. Because I still believed that making a mistake meant I didn't belong. That belief was the real enemy, not English. So I decided something big. The next day, I stood in front of the mirror again. But this time, I didn't rehearse lines. I spoke from the heart. I'm not perfect. I'm not fluent. But I am brave. I will face this again, and I will be better next time. I made one more promise to myself. I will never stop just because I fail. Because failure doesn't mean I'm weak. It means I'm trying something hard. The moment I walked in, I told the group about the interview. I told them how I froze, how I forgot my words, how I almost quit. And then I said, but I'm still here. I still want to speak. And I will not stop. They clapped louder than ever before. One man stood up and said, "You didn't fail, Liam. You grew. Because now you're honest. That's real progress." Those words healed something in me. Not just mirror speaking, not just repeating words, but doing small, real-life English actions. Asking strangers directions in English. Saying thank you in English to shopkeepers. Recording daily updates on my phone in English. Reading short paragraphs out loud and explaining them to myself. I turned English into a lifestyle, not just a subject. Because this journey was never about being the best. It was about never going silent again. And now, I was ready to rise higher than ever before. Part 4. From Silence to Strength. The day I spoke without fear. And everything changed. After the failed interview, after the emotional breakdown, after the promise to never quit, I returned to my journey stronger than ever. But I wasn't just stronger. I was wiser. Because now I understood that English was never my real enemy. My fear was. And that fear lived in the silence between my thoughts. Every time I spoke, I was not just using language. I was fighting my fear. I didn't need to sound perfect. I needed to sound brave. And that mindset changed everything. One evening, my community group coordinator pulled me aside and said, "Liam, next Sunday we're holding an open English-speaking event. Visitors from the city will be joining. We want you to give the welcome speech." I froze for a moment. Me? The same boy who once couldn't say "my name is Liam" in class? He said, "You've been consistent. You've grown. You have a story. People need to hear it." I didn't say yes immediately. That night, I stood in front of my mirror again. My oldest friend. My oldest teacher. I looked at my reflection and asked, "Are you ready?" And for the first time in my life, my reflection smiled back. No one is ever ready. You just speak anyway. So I said yes. Not rehearsing every word like a robot, but building confidence. I didn't write a script. I only wrote bullet points. My journey from fear to English. Why I started. What kept me going. What I want others to feel. Every night, I practiced small parts in the mirror. Every morning, I did a 5-minute voice warm-up. Every afternoon, I told myself one sentence. You are not here to impress. You are here to express. That sentence became my anchor. There were about 40 people in the hall. Half were learners. Half were professionals and guests. Some had suits. Some had notepads. Everyone looked confident. And I was holding the mic. My heart was beating faster than ever. My hands were shaking slightly. But I remembered, I was not here as a perfect speaker. I was here as a living example of what's possible. I walked to the stage, I looked around the room, and I began. Good evening, everyone. My name is Liam. A few months ago, I couldn't say even this line without fear. But today, I stand here because I didn't give up. Silence. Everyone was listening. I come from a place where English is not common. I didn't have a teacher. I didn't have coaching. All I had was a mirror and a promise. I told them everything. My mirror practice, my failures, the frozen interview, the nights I cried, the sentence that changed my mindset. I wasn't reading from paper. I was speaking from my story. And when I said, Fluency is not about sounding like someone else. It's about sounding like yourself, without fear. Some people in the audience nodded. Some smiled. Some closed their eyes and breathed deeply. In that moment, I wasn't just Liam. I was the voice of every learner who ever stayed silent. If you're learning English and you're afraid, that's normal. I was afraid too. But speak anyway, even if your voice shakes, even if you make mistakes, because every sentence you speak is a victory over your fear. And one day, you'll speak like you've always belonged, not because you're perfect, but because you never quit. When I stopped speaking, the room was completely silent. And then, applause. Not polite applause. Real, deep, emotional applause. I didn't cry on stage, but when I walked out of that room, I sat under a tree outside, and I let the tears fall, because I had done it. The boy who once hid in silence had now spoken to a room full of people with truth, power, and freedom. I am no longer learning English. I am now living in English. That sentence was not about fluency. It was about identity. I no longer saw myself as someone behind others. I saw myself as someone walking his own road, with courage. And now, if you're still listening to my story, I want to talk to you. I don't know your name. I don't know where you live. I don't know how many times you've failed or cried or stayed silent. But I do know this. If I can speak English, so can you. Not because I'm smarter, not because I had better tools, but because I decided to keep speaking, even when no one was listening. And that's what you must do. Final lessons. I want you to remember. 1. Your fear is real, but it's not permanent. Every sentence you speak makes it smaller. 2. You don't need fancy words. You need honest practice. 3. English is not just a language. It's a tool for freedom. The freedom to express, to grow, to be heard. 4. You will fail. You will freeze. You will forget. But none of that means you're not learning. It means you're human. 5. Speak every day, even for 5 minutes, even to yourself, even if no one understands you yet. Because one day, and that day will come, you'll speak to someone, and they'll understand you, not just your words, but your journey. And in that moment, you'll know it was all worth it. And before you go, if you felt something in this story, if you saw a part of yourself in my journey, then this is not the end. This is your beginning. Don't let this just be a story you watched. Let this be a spark to start your own. And if you want more stories like this, if you want to grow with me, learn with me, and walk this path together, then subscribe to this channel. Because here, we don't just teach English, we believe in you, even when you don't. And we'll remind you every day, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to begin. Thank you for listening. This was my story. And now, it's your turn. Speak.